Hi everyone, welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Krishnan. I'm the founder of Core Recruitment. We're an international recruitment business that specializes in hospitality, leisure, retail, and a plethora of different sectors. Now we're running this interview series to, I guess, inspire a little bit of positivity and positive thought into the sectors that we operate within. So we've been meeting with lots of different CEOs, company founders, and investors who are doing really interesting things across the sectors that we operate in. You can listen to these on Spotify. You can watch them on YouTube. But there's lots of articles which are on our website, which is www.corerecruitment.com. Now, it was probably about 10 years ago, we started working with an investment company in London who I hold very close to my heart because they work with lots of different passionate entrepreneurs who do lots of different things, called Imbiba. We're very lucky today to be talking to their managing partner, Darrel, who is going to be telling us a little bit about the company and his thoughts in the current market. How are you, Darrel?
I'm very well. How many times you had to? I mean, you reeled that off pretty quickly.
It's
All of
pretty
that
good, right? I mean, you get it down to fine art, and then you're trying not to make it sound too robotic, but then you
sounded
want it
quite
to make.
samey. It sounded quite samey, like you said it lots of times before.
Oh, did it? Fine. I'll take that as a learning for next time. There's going to be, if you're watching this interview, there's going to be a lot of this in this interview where Darrel decides to relentlessly rib me for being alive. But anyway, that's absolutely fine because I'm going to give as good as I get. So, Darrel, for those who haven't seen your meteoric television career, haven't seen you speak at industry conferences, who aren't aware of the wonder that is Darrel Connell, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to being the managing
Oh,
partner at Imbiba?
you said that this wouldn't be cringe. So I guess in Imbiba, we're a very small little boutique investment firm based in Covent Garden, and we focus on investing in kind of what we define as sort of best in class multi-site businesses. Um, so across kind of obviously leisure, entertainment, hospitality, but also in childcare and also in healthcare. And we're typically investing anything between, I don't know, 1 and 10 million pounds into businesses to help them scale, typically opening more sites and build out the management teams and all of that good stuff. That's how our capital gets deployed. And we like to try and get more money back than we put in at the end of the rainbow. We don't always do a very good job of that, but we try our best. We're good triers here. And everyone, God loves a trier. So
God does
yeah,
love a trier. Now, there has been a concerted effort that we've noticed, like within the business, that you are moving beyond hospitality. You've always done stuff outside of hospitality, but there's been a big push into education, into healthcare, into technology, kind of more so. Can you give us a little bit about the background to that and why you've been broadening out?
yeah. I mean, look, I don't need to talk about the challenges of the hospitality market. I think everybody knows they've been widely written about, talked about, all of that good stuff. I think for us, and the most important thing in an investment firm is you are taking money from people, from institutions, and investing it on their behalf. But the most important thing is you have to give it back to them with a return. And that is something that we take very seriously here at Imbiba. And the question of why have we branched out of hospitality into other areas, and it's very important to remember still do hospitality, but the M&A environment, i.e., the ability to sell businesses in hospitality, has become harder and harder over the last 5, 10, 15 years. So if you have a good 15, 20 site hospitality business, if you go back 15 years, that business might have had 10 people bidding to buy it at the time it's being sold. There is no chance of that in today's market. But paradoxically, in other sectors like education, but we've got a big presence in children's nurseries or in healthcare, that still rings true. There would be 10, 15 buyers for a good business in those sectors. So our ability to realize investments and sell investments is something it's very important to us. So we've got to be very mindful of that.
Absolutely. Now, going into different sectors, I know it's something which kind of like trips off the tongue, but education, for example, kind of like it's a massive sector, it's a massive area. How, when you're going into kind of like these, do you kind of say those are the best in class players that we want to be working with, or that's where the growth is? And what level of research do you have to do when you're going into kind of like a different sector? Because it sounds like it's quite a quagmire, right?
Yeah, it is. Look, I mean, we've got. I mean, we've been invested in education for 5, 6 years now. We've learned a lot during that period. That we've made mistakes. We've had some good outcomes. But ultimately, we're backing multi-site businesses to quote unquote roll out, and our expertise comes around site selection, building out teams, and then helping the business scale, and then ultimately exit. We are not meddling in the day to day. We're not running nurseries. We're not running in the same way. We're not running pizzerias, or we're not running pubs. We're backing the founders to do that and their domain expertise. But if you look at some of the nursery businesses we're involved in, Nanny Annies or Monkey Puzzle or Abacus Arc, these businesses, the profile of their customer is a very similar profile of the customer to, say, a Farmer J or a House of Gods or a One Rebel. So that's the sort of a customer we understand, and we understand the location strategy around those. Where should a Farmer J go and where should a Monkey Puzzle go? There's a lot of similar thinking in that. But we are absolutely not in these businesses day to day, running them and looking after children or making pizzas. We never have been or never will be, because that would be a complete disaster.
And when you are looking at potential founders to invest in, who you're going to, partner with for kind of like a good, I assume the term even outside of hospitality is still looking at 5 or 7 years, that kind of length of time.
Yeah.
What are the common trends that you look for when you're kind of like thinking, can I work with this person?
Well, I mean, look, I mean, there's a number of things, isn't there? There's the human side of it. Are they good people? Are you happy to hang out with them for 5 to 7 years? I mean, and are you happy to, have difficult conversations? Do you think you can have difficult conversations with them and that be okay? I mean, it's all the kind of cliches. It's like a marriage and all that good stuff. But there's the people side of it, and then there's the competence side of it and the work ethic side of it. Running small businesses in any sector at any time is really hard work. It's ups, downs, it's, businesses go sideways, have good months, bad months, all of that good stuff. You need somebody with a really, really solid work ethic. And, are they good at what they do? So, a silly example. So Jonathan, the founder of Farmer J, he is maniacally focused on food quality. I mean, he has all the other attributes. He works incredibly hard, all that. But they are passionate about the product, and say the Pizza Pilgrims boys, they are absolutely passionate about the quality of that pizza going out the door, and they always have been and always will be. That sort of stuff to ensure product credibility in the current market is really important. A bit of that transitions to One Rebel, transitions to nurseries, transitions to hotels. It's the same thing.
And when you're kicking the tires of so many different businesses across so many different sectors, I know you'd be looking at cash flow, team quality, consumer kind of like experience, property strategy, that side of things. Is there anything for you that's kind of like red flag? What kills a deal for you when you're kind of like, that's not going to work?
Well, look, ultimately, there's lots of things that can kill a deal, but look, the financial performance of a company is very important. I mean, we might see a pizza business, one pizza business, at site level makes, 300,000-400,000 pounds of profit, and then we'll see another pizza business that makes 20 grand of profit. Which one are you going to invest in if you got the choice, type thing, So, but there's lots of things that can kill deals. But ultimately in these small businesses, it comes down to the strength of the financials, cash flows, P&Ls, and all that good stuff, and the quality of the founders and the brand and the product, really, and the longevity of the product. I mean, there's in the world we now live in, product and brand longevity is something that's very, very hard to put a finger on. There's always a new brand in a sector coming up from behind, always. So how is being an incumbent a risk or an opportunity? It's a difficult. You've got to be very careful. And I guess hospitality is more driven by, I guess I don't want to call it fads, but there's a new opening, how exciting, da, 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 and everyone runs off till there's not a new opening. People don't think so much about childcare nurseries like that. If you live in Clapham and there's a great nursery that's been there 20 years with a great pedigree near the station, it's not a fashion selection, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's something which is essential, which is needed, which is kind of like a repeat service, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Now, you've described Imbiba's approach before as don't interfere in day-to-day operations and, let the founders get on with their strategy. Not every day is a sunny day, I mean, and I know that would be kind of like the perfect thing to do at any point, but what's the line between, right, we're going to get involved and we are going to interfere a little bit with this that you've had to take previously?
Well, day-to-day operations is running the business, right? So, I mean, I heard horror stories of Byron back in the day where their private equity investor was signing off and tasting the patties of the burger. I mean, there's no wonder that business sank down a toilet. The idea of me saying to Jonathan, I'm going to come in and check the the chicken at Farmer J. I mean, it's absolutely nonsensical. I mean, the business would be bankrupt within 10 minutes because I know that's not what I do, and not or anybody here does. But I mean, I guess you are the day-to-day operations of the business and the running of the business. The founders of these businesses and the management team present budgets and plans, and okay, we're going to invest £1 million to open this, and it should generate that in terms of sales and profits. We don't get involved in the detail of that, but similarly, if things become a complete disaster, it's mainly changing the management team or helping the management team or expanding the management team or whatever if things go south. But at no point, it's a massive red flag if private equity firms start wandering into kitchens and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I don't know. You're backing that. What message does that send to the founder? You're backing you back these founders and you back management teams until you don't. You don't try and interfere and meddle in what they do.
100%. Now, a couple of years ago, the big trend in the market, and something that we even heard from you guys, was about franchise. It was about international expansion. It was about Dubai. It was about America. I know Farmer J have opened in New York, and they're doing a phenomenal kind of job there as well. But is that still on the cards with you guys? I know there's some stuff happening with F1 at the moment as well. Is that a big flag for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think international expansion is we've got a number of businesses that have got sites abroad. I think it really depends on what the strategy of an individual business is, if that makes sense. What is the runway of those businesses within this country? I think the days of you've even seen it with Pizza Pilgrims. We're no longer involved in Pizza Pilgrims, but they're now running off to, I think it's Munich, and they're opening sites in Munich because versus just doing the rollout to the 50 odd market towns across the UK. I mean, I think that's been done, and I think people want to see something a bit different now. So we're always looking at certain brands. We're looking at the international opportunities, and we will do. And now whether you do those yourself or whether you do those by franchise partner or JV partner, I mean that's just a specific call. So we've got both. We've got franchisees internationally. We've got JV partners. We've done it ourselves in territories. All can work and all can be a disaster. There's no rhyme or reason for yeah.
So when you're looking at something like Farmer J or F1 or more the hospitality kind of brands, are there any particular markets that you think, like Europe, for example, that's something that I think hasn't been on the card so much for you guys more recently? Is that something you may consider or look at?
Well, I think look, we've typically, if you look at the stuff that we've been involved in, it's become Middle East and or America. For what I think Europe is obviously, firstly, Europe's made up of lots of different countries. So I mean, the good thing is with Farmer J obviously going to New York, if it works in New York, stating the blindingly obvious, you have an enormous runway, or in one territory, one geography, one supply chain, one all of that stuff. If you go to Paris and it works, how many are you going to do in Paris before you kind of got to go to Milan or whatever it might be? And then that's a completely different language. The language is a massive piece as well, isn't it? Not many people speak lots of different languages. So I think, look, and going to America, I mean, notwithstanding the challenges and the difficulties and all of that good stuff and the expense of doing it, the Genie Mac, the expense, it's anglicized, but also the valuation inflection points that you will get for that. If you open something and it works, if you work a bunch of sites in America and they work, and people, potential investors and acquirers can get behind the rollout strategy in America, that is a significant valuation inflection point of the business.
Absolutely. Now, talking about that geographical kind of density, we have noticed, over the past kind of 2 years, especially that you seem to have a bit of a collection of things which are kind of going on at the moment down in Canary Wharf. You live in that part of the world, Darrel? Have you got a particular affinity to it? Is there something going on down there that we all don't know about?
Well, so I definitely don't live there, and the sort of general rule of thumb is wherever I live, I don't want any site anywhere near me because it will probably not work, and that will be really stressful all weekends as well. So no, look, Canary Wharf is, we've always had, but Imbiba going back many years has always had a presence in Canary Wharf, and I guess as an area, it's absolutely flying. People, it's like they've really nailed live, work, play. Obviously going back 10, 15 years, Canary Wharf was a towers full of investment bankers and American lawyers and all that stuff. If you go to Canary Wharf now on a Saturday afternoon, it is heaving, and the Elizabeth line has made a massive difference. The big worry, back in the day was that the Elizabeth line would take people out of Canary Wharf, but actually they brought people to Canary Wharf, and they've created an environment over there where it's, speaking to a female friend of mine, she was like, I love going to Canary Wharf because it feels like I'm in Dubai and it's really safe and it's clean and it's this and it's that. Whereas, certain other areas of London, it might not be the case. So the guys have done a really good job there. Businesses we have, they all trade pretty well there. It's a good area. It's a good part of the world to do business.
Love that. Now, in terms of funding, especially funding within kind of like across kind of like multiple sectors, there's lots in the news, there's lots in the press, there's lots in the media that kind of like it's apparently very difficult to find funding at the moment. But your fund two, which was £90 million, was oversubscribed kind of like quite dramatically. And with companies like British Business Bank and Asahi and all of that side of things as well. Can you tell us a bit about what you were doing with that fund or what your approach has been with that, which has made it a success?
Well, I mean, look, I mean, in what we do, people don't really. There's only one side of the coin that people see about investors, that they're investing money and they have the money. But people in what we do, every 4 or 5 years, we have to go and raise a lot of money ourselves to then, and it's a really, I would say in the game, certainly, you probably, for every yes you probably get 70 or 80 no's, and you've got to fly around the world and you're asking people. It's not like if a company comes to you, if you have a pizza company and it comes to you and says, will you give me funding? Well, we know all the information about that company. We know that when we're raising money, we're going to people and say, we have no idea where we're going to invest it or what we're going to do with it, other than in the UK and into multi-site, but just give it to us anyway. So it's not the easiest of sells. But I guess what the strategy with that fund has been, it's a bigger fund than the first fund that we have. First one was 50, this is 90. Is really it's more of the same. So it's best in class multi-site businesses. We've probably gone to slightly later stage companies. So something like a One Rebel when we got in 11 sites. But on the flip side, we did startups in that fund. We were invested in Little Houses Group, or Our House as it's now called, before we sold it to Blackstone. But it's the same, very much the same as the first fund, but looking to probably deploy a bit more. If we were putting 4 million or 3 million in the first fund into companies, this time we might be looking to put 7 or 8 in total.
And what's the next step of the plan for you? Kind of like, is there a fund three coming soon?
Yeah, there will be. We'll probably be turning our attention to that next year, which I'm absolutely dreading, the fundraising of that. But yeah, look, there will be that there will certainly be a fund three, hopefully, he says. We hope, but I guess we've got to make sure we do a really good job. We've still got some fund assets in fund one, and the way these things work is you invest for 5 years, then you sell them for 5 years. This is typically 10-year funds. So we're still investing in fund two. We've probably made 7 or 8 investments, and we've got another 4 or 5 to make. So we're very active at the moment. No summer holidays for me, Christian. Here we've got 3 or 4 investments on the go, new investments on the go at the moment, which we've got to get over the line in the next couple of months. So we're in it's exciting times.
And as somebody who is investing actively in the tech space, and specifically hospitality tech, kind of tech space at the moment, there's lots of kind of like stuff in the press about obviously around AI and all of this kind of stuff, which is coming up, and how changeable and movable that market is. I guess when you are looking at something and putting it into a fund which is going to last kind of 5 or 10 years, I mean, how the hell do you get your crystal ball to kind of say what that's going to look like in 2 years' time, never mind 5,
Yeah, look, we've got very small exposure to tech businesses. We invested in Wireless Social, which was sold obviously, and we got back Julian, and was a good outcome for us. And we're investors in a business called Opener, which is a really nice menu optimization, price optimization software business. We are absolutely not tech investors, right? So I remember being in this very meeting room probably 5, 6, 7 years ago when I sat with Julian from Wireless, and I was like, look, he was like, will you invest in my business? I was like, we do not want a tech investor. We want investors who are embedded in hospitality and leisure. We do not. I was like, well, if you do want a tech investor, you're wasting your time, because I could barely open my laptop. So we will only invest in tech businesses when we have when we have a real understanding of the customer proposition being relevant in that sector. So when we were doing due diligence when we were talking to Wireless Social, we know all of Julian, or back in the day, we knew 50% of Julian's customers personally. So we could go and speak to them and they'd go, look, it's brilliant, it's great. And exactly the same with Opener. But we are absolutely not prevalent tech investors. And we'd invest in tech businesses slightly later on in the chain when they're profitable or cash generative. We don't want to get into the sort of tech startup scene that is a surefire way for us to lose money quickly because we don't know what
Yeah.
we're doing.
And the steps that you've kind of like the other kind of like, kind of like investors in the sector have done is kind of like looking at integrating supply chain and all of that side of things, but you've never really gone into that kind of like drinks wholesale food kind of like, side of things. Has that been a conscious decision or has the
Yeah.
investment just never kind of come up?
What you talk about in terms of across the portfolio
Yeah.
integrates. Yeah, I mean, we've looked at various bits in the past. Again, that falls very much into meddling in the day-to-day of companies, in my view. Now, if I turn up, to Farmer J and say, right, listen, this should be your chicken supplier or your drink supplier or whatever. Founders don't really want, they want to choose their own drinks, their own chicken, and rightly so. So you can only get so far with that sort of stuff. I mean, look, we work with various procurement firms across the portfolio to try and take costs out and, help and rationalize supply chains in areas, toilet, toilet consumables and all that sort of stuff. But there's quite a lot now of transparency in pricing, and it's up to the founders and management teams of these businesses to negotiate with their supply chain, really, I think, is where we landed with it.
Excellent. Now, I guess a little bit onto the career question, because there'll be a lot of people watching this who will be like, oh my God, being Darrel Connell looks amazing. He's got the best job in the world. It's like, oh my God, look at the guy. He's svelte. He's like so articulate. He's like got his TV career. Oh my God, I'm really milking it now. You're going to hang up on me. However, like, but in terms of like, developing a career, if there is somebody who's working in the operations or the finance side of things, like, what do you need to get into the investment side of things? Because you started off at Grant Thornton, you were then at Just and Foresight and all of that kind of stuff to kind of like move over. So what's given you the experience level and I guess the confidence to kind of like face off with a lot of these people and these investors?
First of all, if anyone's thinking of changing careers to get into this, don't do it. Stay with your current job. It'll be better. It'll be more fun. So that's definitely the case, because in this game, all you get is bad news, right? It's just when there's good news, you don't really. I don't know what it is.
Is this you or is this the sector, Darrell?
Might
I
be
mean, I'm
me.
just throwing it out there.
My shrink says it might be me, but because it's problem, we have a portfolio of 15 companies or whatever it is, and you spend most of your time just dealing when things aren't going as they should have gone, and that's not ideal sometimes. But look, I mean, in terms of my career, graduate scheme coming out of the university, doing stuff in the city. Then I read a book by the editor of Wired. I mean, this is 2022, 23, 24, 25 years ago, which was all about how the internet was going to revolutionize television, which is a stupid thing to say now. And I completely bought. And at that point, obviously, the internet had revolutionized shopping and music, but not really much else at that point. And I was like, absolutely, I totally believe this is going to be true. And there were two companies in the world doing it. One was Juice. Juice was founded by Nicholas Edstrom and Yanis Free, the two founders of Skype. So I joined as their second employee. I got share options. I put the share options into the calculator on the Skype sale. I thought, well, I'll be retired. So I'll just work here for 2 years and then I'll retire. So that's fine. And within you were either a tech guy or a kind of biz dev, marketing, sales kind of guy. I was not a tech guy, so I did that, and that was a spectacular lesson in. This was a tech startup. It was funded by Sequoia, who are the best VC investor in the world. First time they'd ever made an investment in the UK. It was funded by Index. It was funded by the who's who of the VC community. We had the coolest office in Covent Garden. It was like I had made it. I was like 23. It was party after party. The problem was Juice was an online TV company. So think what iPlayer or whatever now. The problem was the tech didn't work. We had no content. It was really shit. The whole thing was, can I say that? Sorry. It was poor. But the parties were really good and we were flying over here and flying everywhere. And then suffice to say, pre-revenue, no money. Suffice to say, the whole thing ended up massively crashing and burning. Millions and tens and hundreds of millions were lost. But a great lesson in life for me. I then went to Grant Thornton, and that was quite so. Having gone from like a super cool office in Covent Garden with loads of very attractive people, having a great time, to going to an accountancy office in Euston. That is quite the leveler, should we say? So I went to Grant Thornton with a very specific mandate to invest partners' cash into tech, like exciting tech companies. Bear in mind, this is 2006, 2007, so this is 20 years ago. And so to do a bit of that, and then also to kind of do so early stage corporate finance for sort of tech businesses. Suffice to say, when the global financial crisis hit, Grant Thornton partners were less interested in punting 100 grand into dodgy tech companies and more interested in school fees and mortgages at that point. So that sort of, I did 3 years there, and actually it was really good for me. I got a lot more accounting qualifications and all that sort of stuff, as you'd expect. And then I joined Foresight, which is a large private equity firm based in the Shard. It wasn't back then; it was based down in Kent. And I spent 7 years at Foresight, which was a great learning curve, but doing private equity investments from primary. I'm doing a lot on multi-site stuff, and yeah, and then I kind of obviously came over, and then we did the Imbiba thing. So so a bit of a kind of a sort of quite. I mean, I've been doing Imbiba now for 10 years, so yeah, lots of different things. But started the juice days were definitely the most fun. But then it went bankrupt. That's a shame.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, if we break this next bit into kind of two parts, because like when you are, I guess, recruiting for your team, because there's the analytical skills, there's the people building skills, there's like, I mean, like, I've met some of the people that you work with and they are incredible people, Darrell, you know what I mean? Like, but what do you look for when you're kind of like looking to find people in your own team?
So we're a bit different here in that we have there's two roles. There's just like there's the investment side, which is if you go into 99% of the private equity firms in the UK, there's a typical profile of a investment manager, director, whatever you want, people doing deals, and that is either chartered accountant, management consultant background, or mostly investment banking, right? So they come out and it's quite. We found here in what we do, I think the game has slightly changed. Interpersonal skills. So if you go back to private equity 25 years ago, the kind of, master of the universe, you work for me, these are the deal terms. But now there's just so much capital around for good businesses. The pendulum has swung. So the founders have the power. So you need that, EQ is equally as important as IQ. So we've taken a lot more people from the most recent people that have joined our business have been founders and entrepreneurs themselves. So they've built businesses and they've joined us. So yeah, the actual investment side of things, running models and doing the financial side of things has become increasingly commoditized. I mean, and even more so with Claude and all other building models and all that stuff. It's actually once you've made the investment, being able to work with the founders and help the founders and all of that stuff. So when we're hiring now, we're typically hiring more on that operator side and keeping the investment side quite thin. We've got, and it sounds like a really stupid thing to say, but I feel really sorry for like the youngsters coming through these days. I mean, how these guys get a job, it's really so we get a lot of inbounds from 22-year-olds, so we do a lot of work experience people coming through here, and we've actually just hired one who did a great job, is so keen and so hungry and wants to, so I think there's a big part of me that thinks we've got here, in little old Imbiba parlance, we've got a job to play in helping people, youngsters, get on the kind of give them a chance, really. So there's always interns running through our business. Yeah.
That's a really good thing. The other part that you've always been really good at is kind of like partnering these entrepreneurs that you're working with, and I think chairperson is a bit of a grand job title, but kind of like a mentor, NED individual who can come on board to really kind of like, partner with them. How do you get that marriage correct? Because like not like all of the entrepreneurs have obviously got some big personalities and that kind of like side of things as well. How do you put that together?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've got a bank of people that we work with. We've had success at it. We've had failure at it. The slight failing which I think we have, and I think the industry has here, is that when you set a chairman or a NED to join the board, that there's often like forever, if that makes sense, or for the life of the journey. Actually, maybe because these businesses all evolve, maybe you should have a chair or a NED for 2 years and then change it up. But people don't do that. We don't need to do that either. And it's something we talk a lot about. But look, if you get a good chairperson or a NED or mentor or whatever, it's all the same thing, really. They are worth their weight in gold. If you get a poor one, they are a complete pain in the arse, and it's a nightmare for everyone involved. It's all about this. The good ones are the ones that are very professional, but are able to develop a very professional relationship with both the investor and the founders. Sometimes, there's many different versions. Sometimes they can either become, well, the bad ones are the ones that are sort of the founders see as a sop for the investors, and equally the bad ones who end up becoming mates with the founders. So it's that professionalism and advice and counsel, but in a very sort of in a very considered way, which I think is important.
Absolutely. The next question, and it's a topical one because obviously we're standing at this precipice at the moment where we have a new leader for the UK. I was going to try and avoid politics, but I figure like why not dance into like straight into the subject here? So I'll ask the positive question of what do you think for an positive business and investment environment? What do you think Andy Burnham should be doing for us?
Well, look, I mean, I'm not, look, it seems I will not give my personal views here, but
Oh, go on.
from a business perspective, it seems, I mean, for the sector, he's a bit more into the sector than his predecessor was.
Yeah.
So as a general, so that's a good thing. But if you've seen bond yields in the last, since he took over, they've been creeping up, and there is just this general view is it's all very interesting, but how are you going to pay for all this stuff that you want to do? And I think people are a bit bored of continually being taxed. I think there's just a sort of, so he wants to solve cost of living, but anyway, so it's going to be interesting to see how, obviously everyone wants that cut and everyone wants this cut and everyone wants that cut, and that all makes sense. How likely is it? I don't know. We have a welfare state, we have an NHS that costs a lot of money, and that's a decision that people have made to put those in place. So I don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see. But it seems, I guess, it's a good thing that he is going to make decisions, and he is predisposed to the sector, I think.
Which is a good thing. Absolutely. And if you were an entrepreneur out there who's watching this right now, like, financially kind of like things might be a little bit constrained, looking at the market, the outlook, all of that kind of side of things, what advice would you give people for the next 12 months in terms of running their business for my final question?
There's only one thing that matters: cash. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow, and cash flow. Just nail that down. Don't do anything rash at the current climate. It's a difficult market. Just be prudent, be careful. Certainly that is certainly the attitude that we have to a number of the businesses we're involved in, is prudence and cash and just caution. We've seen it, and we see it all the time. Over exuberance, you can get tripped up and cash flow starts getting hammered, and then life gets a lot harder.
Absolutely, 100%. Darrel, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I know how busy you guys are at the moment and jetting around the world and opening up all these concepts and doing all that stuff. It's great fun, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly it. It's just a dream. It's just one big party, Christian. See you later. Thanks a lot.